disclaimer?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
For this week's podcast, we'll be talking about some pretty controversial stuff, to say the least, and we want to give a disclaimer before that this is our opinion, and it is completely fine to have differing opinions, but please respect the fact that, yeah, these are our opinions. Um, yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep, cock.
So I guess with that being said, we can get into the meat and potatoes.
Wait,
Yeah.
before you do that.
Yeah.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Salty Runback Podcast, episode 5. I'm Chico.
I'm Jay.
And welcome to this week's episode. Okay, you can go now.
Okay. So, yeah, the whole um fuck. Oh yeah, yeah, okay, okay. I remember what we're gonna talk about. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah, we made a disclaimer, remember?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
This thing we're gonna talk about is Roe v. Wade. Um
Yes.
on the super off chance that someone's watching isn't from here, Roe v. Wade is will let abortion be a constitutional right to some point. Like states could make some limitations about abortion, but like the right to abortion was a constitutional right.
Yep.
And it's been in place for 50 years. But
Yeah.
recently, um, the Supreme Court um, has decided to repeal that and um, basically leave it up to the states. And um, not every, that doesn't mean every state is going to make abortion harder or illegal or so on. But there were like I think it was 22 states that had a trigger laws, which basically means like they are laws that would come into place if ever um Roe v. Wade was overturned.
Mm.
And now, it's open for these states to make either abortions way harder or just illegal. Um so well, as the disclaimer said, these are my opinions, right?
Yeah.
I think this was pretty bad, like really bad. Um, for a couple of reasons. First one being, an abortion should be. It's like it's a woman's body, right? I think they should have the right to um, choose what to do with their body.
Mm.
That shouldn't be something that's like forced. It shouldn't be illegal,
Right.
and it makes it a lot harder for like if a woman is rich, it sucks, but they can like if they have money, they can go to a different state where abortion is still legal and get an abortion. But it really sucks for the people who don't have money or the time to go to a different state and get an abortion, So they're really stuck. Um if they ever got into a situation where they thought abortion would be for the best, they're
Right.
kind of stuck. Um which which is I don't know. I think that's really unfortunate. And the other thing is the problem that I think is most Americans, I think, like even Republicans, are. I'm not saying all Republicans. Oh, it's so hard because it's such a touchy subject.
I mean,
But I
listen, you
think
already you already
I
dropped the
disclaimed it. Yeah,
disclaimer. Yeah, yeah,
I
you're
think
good.
almost all Democrats, and some Republicans, like towards the middle, the more middle side, um, didn't want this. Like a large population of America didn't want this. But SCOTUS, which is an abbreviation for the Supreme Court, still went through with it, which is kind of scary if you think about it, because they're supposed to do what, like, the government is supposed to work for the people. If, in my opinion, that's like the gist of it.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we've kind of strayed for that. But the fact that SCOTUS, which was supposed to be I'd like to believe it was supposed to not be as political as the other branches as much. There's of course still politics in there, but like for law, I feel like you should be as unbiased and shouldn't let your political ties um to as much as you can affect your decisions. But the fact that I would say more than half of America didn't want this and it still went through is quite a statement for the current climate of the US, you know. Um, and I know a lot of people are also worried about what this means because if people didn't know, I think it was a 6-3 vote for
I think so, yeah.
um it was a 6-3 vote for to overturn Roe v. Wade, and now people are worried that the same thing's going to happen for other things such as same sex like marriage
Mm.
and stuff like that. So a lot of people worry that this is just the start, and there's gonna be a lot more in the future. And because for the most part, being a Supreme Court judge is like a lifetime sentence, not a sentence, but a lifetime position. Sorry. Um, this is this seems to be the trend that we're going to be for most of the foreseeable future. Um, and that's like, I guess I don't want to say the general gist of it because we I went into a little bit of detail regarding everything, but yeah, and now there are a lot of protests um going around all over the country. Um, and of course, we can talk about our opinions on whether men should be able to make laws about a woman's body, um, stuff like that, which is another very hot topic right now in the US.
Mm.
And a lot of um I don't think it really I don't want to say this because I feel like it'll make it sound like I'm after saying all of that I'm under like I don't quite know the word undervaluing is not the word, but like underestimating the effects because most of my friends won't have a problem with that because I don't think Illinois is one of those states with the trigger.
Uh-huh.
Um, and even if it was, like, most of my friends have the capability of going somewhere at least where they would be able to get an abortion. But yeah, I don't know. Just the fact that there are a lot of people who won't be able to do that, I think is quite a problem. And you can jump in if you have anything that you want to say.
That was the most robotic ending I've ever.
Yeah, it's because like when I'm trying to think,
Uh-huh.
because like I don't want to say anything too bad. Like I know I did put a disclaimer, but like I still want to I'm still walking on eggshells, so I'm like thinking of the word and thinking if it's all right. So it's like
Yeah.
pretty robotic because I'm just trying to make
That's
sure that I'm not saying anything too controversial,
yeah.
I would say.
That's fair. I mean, I try to follow everything based on what's like quote unquote like politically correct terms, but at the end of the day, what conveys the best is probably just what is, for me at least, what conveys the best is just taking whatever words I know with whatever context I have, and I'm just like, okay, I'll just throw it here, and if this isn't like the politically correct definition for it, then like I'm willing to correct it and I'm willing to change it, but just know like my intention was not that. So
Hmm.
there's that. Brief pause. I had to move my snacks.
That's
Um,
fair.
that part's getting edited.
No,
The
no, no, no.
I think first and foremost, for my end, I'm definitely of the thought that women should have the choice ultimately of their own body. And while I'm not as knowledgeable about the whole discussion of is it a life, does it, does it count as a life at that stage, I do still think that like there's just so many potential situations where, at least from how I see it, there's just so many potential situations where an abortion option would be more beneficial than harmful.
Hmm.
And especially for individuals like you said who don't have the time and resources, not just to like go out of their way to another state, but also just if they don't have the ability to raise the child, right?
Hmm.
And sure, you can say, oh, if they don't have the ability to raise the child, then send them. You don't have to kill off. You don't have to kill the child yet. You can send them to orphanages. You can send them to foster care. But it's like then it comes down to this concept of, are you going to are you saying that the child has to hold responsibility for the parents' irresponsibility, or maybe it wasn't even like a responsibility issue? What if like their like birth control just wasn't effective that day, or what if the condom broke? Like there's more potential for mishap that like can be addressed with just having abortion being available, as
Hmm.
opposed to going about the other route, which is to keep like to not let abortion be legal, and instead just whatever children are born into the world, they should just be sent into foster care or orphanages and stuff like that. And it's just kind of like, I think that's the part that kind of hurts for me, is this idea that you know who's going to, because I think we can all say this with certainty, like as much as I'd love to say that the kids who are going into orphanages and foster care, like hopefully they'll be getting some level of like mundane treatment, but the reality of the situation is like that isn't the case. And like I think like I can't speak too much on the actual numbers, but I feel like I've heard so many um just bad stories about how like some foster care areas kids are just like stuck in that system, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Like, I have a friend who worked for like half a year, I think,
Mm-hmm.
in like that system, and they're like, and they left that like industry because they're like, I want to help the children. I want to do like what I can, but like they're just stuck. Like
Yeah.
there's so much like you don't know about. Like there's a lot of legal stuff as
Mm-hmm.
well that like just doesn't work out. Like it's really hard for things to work out legally and everything. So they're like, it feels like I'm not doing anything. Like I'm doing my best, but like I just can't help them.
Yeah, I can see that. And it's just like that's the last thing we want people to be feeling, right? This idea
Hmm.
that they feel like they can't help contribute to the solution of a problem that has been created by, our as a consequence of our legal decisions. And I think
Yeah.
like not only is that a bad scenario, but also like the idea where it's just, maybe this is looking a bit too deep into the whole numbers game, but like, or not game, but just the concept of numbers. Like, if we have more people, assuming that our expansive sexual awareness and like sexual education is remains the same, and abortion is no longer a constitutional like right? If that happens, and then we just have a bunch more people just like throwing their children out, um or
Or
not throwing their children out, but just like just bringing more kids into the world, right? Kids
yeah,
that we might not necessarily have the resources for, kids that we might not necessarily have the time for, or like the parents for even, like, then it's just like, I don't know, that idea for me is a lot worse
yeah,
than,
and
yeah.
it's like the other option, which is just as bad, if not worse, is home abortions, which people did
Yeah.
before,
Yeah.
like clothes hanger abortions, stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I don't think I'd like to believe those won't. we won't go back to doing that
Mm-hmm.
because like but back then they also just didn't know how dangerous it was. But I'm pretty sure most people do at this point.
Hopefully, yeah.
Um, if not, I hope at least the education of it goes like health. If this happens, I feel like we can talk about this later. But health education should go further than you know.
Yeah.
Um, but outside of that, like I hope it doesn't get to the point where home abortions start occurring again because there's a really high chance that the mom's gonna die too then, and it's like you know what happens then.
Right.
Um, and I don't know. I feel like a lot of we could how do I put this? It's really hard to convince anyone of either side to to switch sides. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I doubt that we could have like sit someone down here who's um pro life and like really convince them. And I would be hard pressed to believe that someone who's pro life could convince me either. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um so it's such a I don't want to say interesting topic because that's not the word. It's such a do you know what I'm trying to say?
I mean,
What's
you
the
could say
word?
like unique or.
Yeah, it's such a unique and like
Mm.
opinionated conversation. Like looking at I feel like a lot of debates you could look at like numbers kind of
Uh.
or like facts, but in this situation it's really hard to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that also makes it really hard. But I'm quite worried about what the future holds for our laws. Um
It's like what's
because
next, right?
yeah, cuz I know I knew that it was being discussed Roe v. Wade. I never thought that it would be overturned so fast. And maybe that's because I wasn't really looking into it. I didn't really think it was going to happen either.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when I woke up like a couple days ago and I saw that, I was like, God damn, we're really, really back here, huh? Um, and I don't know. After I saw that, I was like, damn, maybe I want to like move out of the US. Like that I didn't seriously like sit down and consider it, but the fact that that crossed my mind, is quite yeah, quite. I wonder how a lot of other people reacted to that. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's like. My brother had the same reaction too, or not like he wasn't like seriously saying like I want to like leave, but it's like like that's it's a pretty big fucking red flag for the people who were on the side of pro-choice, and like
Yeah.
I think for me one of the biggest problems that I can think of at the moment, well, there's two, I guess. So one is like, a lot of people, like we mentioned earlier, were talking about, oh, then what's going to happen specifically about like, same-sex marriage rights, because like that's been a topic
Uh-huh.
that's been quite debated, and like, right when we thought that we were at a point where we were relatively safe and tame with our legal decisions, like generally speaking, then like this happens and it's like all of a sudden everyone's like, oh shit, like now what, like what's gonna happen next, who, like, what are they going for next? And like for me, the other thing past same-sex marriage is like gun laws, right?
Hmm.
Because for me, um like one of the things that I think it's like it goes without saying. I hope it goes without saying. I pray to God it goes without saying. But I'd like to think that we can all agree that children should not be being shot up at schools, right? Like
Hmm.
in no world should this be happening. And like the concept, one of the things that would like potentially be very beneficial is just like increasing background checks on people who are buying guns, right? um Raising age limits and like doing other things like that. And like for me, what kind of put me at like a cross, or not really a crossroads, so like one thing that kind of like got me a bit stuck in terms of my thinking because of my limited political education, and also just maybe my lack of depth in thinking about it. But it's like for me, it turned into an issue of, okay, well, if we don't go about background checks because people feel like they're entitled to their guns and they don't want the extra hassle affiliated with like getting their guns and keeping their guns, and we're basically, in order to not protect but just uphold, I guess, their right to that, and in exchange we potentially leave our children more vulnerable, then it's like, what other compromises are we going to make off of this idea of giving people their freedom of choice? Like, at what point can we all really sit down and be like, okay, like, you need to understand that this is an issue that presses beyond our individual like freedom. Is there even an issue that can do that because of the way that there's so much like concept of freedom is so heavily incorporated into America as a whole, right? So it's just
Mhm.
like, how would there even be something that can do that? And then for me, like I think like looking at Roe v. Wade, I was thinking like, fuck, if this happens, if this happens, um, for other like large contentions and large issues that are currently going on in the states, then it's kind of like, it brings up almost too many what ifs, and too many, and of those what ifs, it's just a lot of them are not, in my opinion, a very positive outlook. And I think that's, I'm sure a lot of people are thinking in like a similar way, in the sense of like, what's next? What else are they going to potentially fuck up? What else are they going to overturn or change or incorporate or enforce? And what's, and also like back to what you said earlier, like assuming that that's correct, that more than half of the United States like didn't want this to happen, then it's like, if that mass opinion is not regarded by SCOTUS, then ultimately our voices are dying down as people, right?
Yeah, yeah. Like
So
it's
then,
becoming less
mm,
about us and more about like their party's power, in my opinion.
right. And then whenever it goes in that direction, then it's like, then it turns into like, people will feel less inclined to vote, people will feel less inclined to like be involved, period. And more people are going to not only feel detached, but it's, it might turn into like people who are joking that they might leave the states might actually just leave the states, because if this stuff keeps happening, right? If these kinds of changes that are um not insensitive, but rather like um not indicative of following the opinions of the people and the thoughts of the people, then it's like, well then, we're no longer sitting on like a, maybe we haven't been, but if we're going purely by conceptual terms, um like we're not a democracy, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
we're not, the forces at
Or
the top
even a
are not being
republic.
pushed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like, at that point, then it's like, all right, well, what are we gonna do? Like, if everything's just determined by who has more money and who has more support, then it's like, what's your average daily person, like, what's your average person gonna do then? Like,
Yeah.
what options do they have for themselves?
Like outside of election,
Right, exactly.
which is every 4 years.
Yeah, and it's just like, it's just that would be, I think that's like the bad end of bad ends, is if ultimately people not only like lose their voice, but like it just they just can't speak up. Period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting how like I think I'm not like a professional or like very the most um learned on this subject,
Uh huh.
but it's interesting how this is I want to say it's very rare, but it's one of the rarer cases where like most of the argument is based off of religious reasoning.
Mm.
I feel like a lot of the reasoning for um against against abortion is like strictly religious, like it's a sin, you know. Um,
Mm.
which sucks to say, but I don't know how much religion should really be in lawmaking, I guess. And I know it's hard to separate that because you want your politician, your government to represent your ideals, and if a lot of your ideals are based off of your religion, then it's hard to separate that. But I don't know if I don't know if a decision that affects tens of millions of women should be like the argument can be, oh, the Bible says it's a sin when not, everyone is Christian, So I don't
Right.
know. It seems forced, like for us to believe in something that's you might have to like cut this out while I'm trying to think of what I'm trying to say. But it's almost like we're being forced to believe in an ideology that like even if you don't want to, now it's a law.
Mm.
So like that's also kind of scary, I guess, in a way. Like if future laws become laws because of Christian ideals, like it's almost like we have to adhere to those ideals, I guess.
Right.
Um, and I am personally not Christian, so I don't know how I feel about that, I suppose. And we can that gets I feel like religion's also another very touchy subject, so I don't want to go too deep into that because that would be another large, large discussion. But yeah, I wanted to talk about SCOTUS's decision because unfortunately I feel like this marks a very beginning of a very dark time in at least lawmaking and government, which is unbelievable to say
Mm.
after the recent like events that have been occurring. This on top of gun control after all the shootings, on top of like a very vindictive, I think,
Vindictive.
opinions,
Yeah.
vindictive opinions of our former president and of our current president. Like, for me to say that this is the beginning of a dark era is like scary because other people would probably be like, yo, your government's already been in a dark era for like the last 6 years. But it's like,
Yep.
man, it might get worse. Which, you know, I
Yeah.
don't
I
know.
don't know. I mean, Um. I can't speak on like most things for this subject. I can't speak much on the specifics or the deeper, finer details. But as someone who um has consumed a decent amount of media and just like lives as like somewhat of like middle class average person, it's kind of like, yeah, these past few years haven't been great, and just to see, it's not, I don't think it's like a downward spiral, but this recent case was definitely like a big like red flag slash upset from my perspective at least. And it's kind of like, okay, we just had the equivalent of like, if we're talking like earthquakes, like the other stuff, they were like tremors and like, premonitions and like whatever, and then all of a
Or
sudden, yeah, fours, like 3 point whatever's, and then all of a sudden we got hit by like an 8,
yeah.
and it's like, shit, like most of us were not ready for that. And again, it's caused a lot of upset, a lot of uproar. And but I think, what, another thing that's like important to address too is just like, we're like, I'm saying this as someone who, um as of this moment, is not directly affected by this decision, but
Mhm.
there are friends, there are like friends of friends, relatives, like coworkers, what have you, like those people will be directly affected by this decision. And like ultimately I think it's just the extra amount of fear that they have to live with, that they have that much less freedom on their, like of
Own
their
body.
body. Yeah, like I
Yeah.
think that's like, that's something that's kind of like, I almost said monkas. Um, that's
I
like,
mean, it would have been appropriate.
like it's
It is
just, it
Monka.
is monkas. It's just, it's very frightening. And I think like, yeah, I don't know. I, as much as I don't want to agree with you, like I do think this is a very big like indicator that like
Yeah.
something, there's going to be a wave that we ride, but the question is really like, what's the nature of this wave? Because clearly something big's about to hit again, but it's a matter of, you know is it a good wave, or are we riding a wave of like
I
rotten
don't
trash and sludge
I don't
into,
think I don't think it can possibly be a good wave. Let's hit it
well,
with a neutral
yeah,
wave.
neutral wave, neutral wave,
Yeah.
neutral wave. I like,
But
yeah.
I think something that's at least a little helpful is the fact that there are protests going on. I think it would have been
Mm-hmm.
really bad if like that passes and there aren't protests, and it's kind of, I don't want to say bad, but like it's quite audacious of me to say all of this and not be out there protesting.
Hmm.
At least a part of me thinks that. Like, oh, if you have such strong ideals of this, like I should be out there protesting. But the other part of me is like, I don't know. Like, I'm not comfortable doing that, and I would like to do at least something to speak out for it, which
I
is how I'm
uh
coping
I'm
with
gonna,
it with my
I'm
talent.
gonna say this, right? I'm gonna say this as someone who's like worked in community organizing,
Uh-huh.
and is currently part of like an org where like we address things like that. Like, I think people need to hear this. People really need to hear this. Just because people are not out there and protesting and doing shit, that does not mean like they deserve to get shit on, right? Like, this
Mm,
isn't a thing where it's like the only way you can show your support is by being at that front line. Like, if that was the case, like, no, like these things wouldn't be nearly as effective if the only kind of support you looked for is like frontline support. There's countless other ways people support. There's countless other ways. Even just like, even us having this discussion in the first place, like we're not, like we're doing it in our own way, and we're doing it in a way that's comfortable and within our capacity, and that's completely fine. I don't think people, I hate this idea that some people think that you should be ridiculed and be told like, oh well, if you feel so strongly about this, like why aren't you out there, why aren't you doing shit? And it's like, I am doing shit, I'm doing my own shit, because not everyone has the capacity or the desire to be out at the front, like, and we need to respect that. Because if we
mm,
don't respect that and we start disregarding people because you're like, oh, you say you feel so strongly but you're not doing shit, like, oh, then fuck you. then like you don't matter. And it's like, okay, then you're just losing support for your cause, and you're losing momentum with that. And like some people just have such a toxic mindset about this idea of what support and thought means, and like people, I think those people are also they're devaluing this idea of like conversation and communication, because it's very important that people have as much conversation as they do action. If it was all pure action, right? If people were just out there and like only yelling and screaming, like okay, yeah, sure, like you might get something done, but like then what? Like how do you, it's not just a scream fest. It's not just a fight fest. Like you need to talk. You need to know how to talk about the things that you care about, and sometimes that requires people to sit down and with like-minded people and just dwell, just sit, chill, think about it, let it process, let it digest. Not enough people, at least from what I've seen, sometimes not enough people respect that, and I think it's awful that people are dismissing and putting other people down for not standing at the front. Like there's several ways you can show support, and there's several ways that you can like go about showing your support, and you should not feel bad that you are not at the very forefront of it all, because some people just aren't meant to be at the front. Some people don't want to be at the front, and that's okay. It's all right. That's a PSA. You needed to hear that. If you're someone who is thinking, "Oh man, like, I can say all this shit, but ultimately I'm not standing at the front lines, so I don't have a right." No, you have a right to say what you want to say. You have a right to think what you want to think and feel what you want to feel. You shouldn't be seen as like that much less of a supporter just because you're not standing at the very forefront of this movement or these protests or whatever. Like that's just, it's
I
ridiculous, and it's very like, I know you didn't mean it that way, but it's
uh,
just it like it triggered, it gave me a visceral reaction to when someone actually did react that way, and they were like, "Oh, you know, you say all these things, but like you're not out there, are you? So like are you really, like do you like really feel that strongly about it?" And it's just like, what what do you, like what are you trying to accomplish from this? Like what's the goal here?
I think like for me, like I completely agree with what you said, and I know some people actually say that. But
Hmm.
for me, it's more along the lines of like, oh, there's so much more I could do.
Uh
It's just like that thought of like, oh, maybe I should be doing more,
yeah,
rather
yeah.
than like it doesn't matter what I am doing. It's more of the thought of like, oh, like I could be doing more. So like
Hmm.
it's just that balancing act, I suppose, of like how much, let me rephrase, how comfortable am I, how words, how
Yes.
comfortable am I with like going out with my voice, and also like how educated am I,
Hmm.
like I said before, I'm not the most educated on this discussion, and I'm sure many other people have like dedicated a lot of time on this issue and this matter, you know. So
Right.
it's like, yeah, I don't know. I'm glad we are talking about it though, and like how it probably will affect the rest of this, like the, like you said, a wave. Like it'll be a wave,
Hmm.
and we'll just have to see how it goes. I'm not very optimistic. Um, if you guys haven't caught on by now, I'm more of a pessimistic type in comparison to Chico here. Um, I don't know. I feel like it'll probably be a little more of a negative wave, whether it be just in law or whether it be just, I don't I don't want it to get this far, but like whether the protests stay peaceful, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's such a delicate point of like one wrong move can trigger a lot of things in this type of um environment, I guess, especially on such a touchy subject. That's like run predominantly by mostly emotion and religion, which I think are like the most illogical like forces for humans. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a pretty
So
bad combination for
yeah,
what it's warranting.
yeah. So it's like kind of scary of how thinking about how bad it can get. You know
Mm.
what I mean? Like, God forbid something like this happens, but let's say a peaceful protest becomes not peaceful. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And like, what kind of message does that um send to the rest of the world as well? You know what I mean?
Mm.
So, yeah, I suppose that is quite, um, yeah, quite scary. After saying all this, maybe I do want to leave. Okay. This is kind of off topic, but I have been
uh,
thinking of like wanting to work abroad for like a year or two. You know what I mean?
yeah,
I feel like that'd be neato, but that doesn't have to do with like this topic as much.
right. But
Um,
it just so happens that the
yeah,
possibilities have lined up.
yeah,
Yeah,
like the stars are aligning. I don't know if I wanted them to align like this, but
the world's telling me to run.
yeah. Uh, why did I say
You tell me, bro.
but yeah. Oh fuck, I did it. We can't go to we can't go an episode without it.
I really can't. I can edit all the awkward pauses and whatever the fucks, but I can't run away from the demons that are. But yeah, yeah, no. Anyways,
Anyway,
god
kind of
damn it.
funny. At this point, it's like a bit, but it's not a bit because we don't even control it.
Yeah, that's why I hate it. If it was a bit, if it was a controlled bit, I'd be okay with it. But clearly, it's not.
Yeah.
Clearly, it's instinctual. There's something else there.
Uh, uh, did you? This is I don't know if this is a joke, but I saw this like
Mm.
video or like this comment. Like but I don't even fully remember how like where I saw this
Uh.
and what like medium I saw this. But dead ass, I saw someone or read about someone who said, "Isn't it funny how all the people that are for like pro-life are already born?" And I had to sit here for a second. Yeah, I had to sit here for a second and just be like,
Bro,
did
what?
he did this person did did this
Bro,
person just say that?
those are sentences made by a person. Oh my god.
They were hand like the fact that they thought about it, those words, and then they chose to say those
It
words.
had to be satire. Like, it had to be.
That's what I'm thinking. But I part of me feels like this. Let me see if I can find it again.
Like, there's no way that isn't satire. It's just no way. I refuse to believe it. Actually, no, I could kind of see. uh, that reminds me of the fucking you you've had to have seen this. There was like a series of tweets where it was this person saying like, "Oh my god, I just learned that China is 12 hours ahead of us.
I know exactly what you're talking
Why
about.
didn't they
Yeah,
warn us
they
about
warned us about 9/11.
9/11?" And
Fuck
I'm
yeah.
just like, the first time I read that, I was like, okay, this also has to be satire, right?
I didn't I can't find it right now off the
Fuck.
bat.
Dude, it's
But
the same energy, and it's just the fact that it's the same energy just makes me pray that it's satire. Like,
yeah,
holy moly, that's a sentence.
yeah.
That's a fucking sentence.
But then it's like I don't want to say this because this is also kind of iffy, but it's like,
Uh
so
huh.
you're saying that the unborn people, like, are you saying they have feelings or that they don't have feelings? Like, I I just I I don't I don't know how their mind worked to be able to say that sentence.
I like what is it? Someone there was something about like the discussion of like sentience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, for whatever stage that the unborn child is at,
Mm-hmm.
and like I guess if I knew more about it, I could say more about it. But for me, it's kind of like even actually this might be dangerous. I'll simplify. I'll simplify it.
Yeah.
Like I think instead like I think it is important to have a discussion of like the definition of life and what have you, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
also like is that definition of life, are we going to make that an umbrella term? Like when we say the definition of life, are we like branching it out to like every stage of life? Because clearly we value different stages of life differently too,
Mm-hmm.
right? So then it's like are we not going to address that part? Are we just going to go about it as if it is an umbrella term? And like that part to me didn't make a whole lot of sense. Maybe that's already been debacled, but for me that was an interesting food for thought. This idea of like if we, let's say hypothetically, we do count that as like um, life. Do we define that as life? Then where does that stand on the priority or the significance or what have you?
I'm
Like
I'm
where does
pretty
that?
sure they like already know when thoughts are first formed, like sensation and stuff like that is formed.
All right,
So
sentience.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know the specifics about that, like when it begins and all that,
Mm,
but I know that I I can't say I know that all of the laws, like the 22 states, are like before that, but I'm pretty sure there are some states that are banning it before that stage. You know what I mean?
right.
Which doesn't make much sense to me. Okay, I was gonna say something really dangerous. Okay, never mind.
Today's gotta catch myself.
Yeah, like that was almost really bad.
Some thoughts need to stay on the inside, not because we have bad thoughts, but it's just we might say some unintelligent things, and that's even with the disclaimer that does not cover ignorance. So
I'll
yeah.
I'll type it to you. How about that?
Wow. Yeah.
And then you can tell me if I can say it.
Worst comes to worst, I edit it out. So there's that. So let's take a gander at his statement, shall we? I think for this stuff too, like wording is also really important. Oh my god.
It almost came out of my mouth. Like I was clowning on the man who was like, "Oh yeah, all the people that are pro-choice are already born." I was about to
Oh my
spit
god.
spit this sentence out.
Oh my god. Woo. I think wording is definitely definitely sub ideal.
Yeah, suboptimal.
Yeah, suboptimal.
But like, you
But
know where I'm trying to come from,
yeah,
right?
I
Like,
get what you're saying. I get what you're
yeah,
saying. This is definitely not a announced to the public kind of
yeah,
sit.
yeah,
This is a three. This is more of like the vibes are like 3 a.m. You're sitting down with your bros and you're like, hey. Like, what if, dog?
Yeah, but I'm just saying that I feel like pre-sentience is like a good line. I don't know what that is, and
Hmm.
it's quite late, so I don't have it in me to look. I'll look it up.
Just be careful. This
Uh,
could result in a whole nother.
okay, yeah, okay. 18 to 25 weeks. I feel like a lot of the laws are before that. Or if not a lot, a good chunk of them, you know.
Yeah,
So,
and I'd
um
like to think that. Um, I'd like to hope that most women would know what kind of choice they want to make by then.
yeah, I completely agree. That's like 4 months, a little above. So
Yeah.
that's a I don't want to say that's a lot of time to think about it because it is a really big choice,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like
But
one of the
it's
life altering decisions. But
it's a decent amount of time
yeah,
to
it's
at
not like you're
least
only
sit
given
down.
yeah, it's not like you're only given a week or two, you know.
Right, right, right.
It's a good amount of time to weigh your like I don't want to say weigh your options, but like think if you can handle the consequences of either action, I suppose. Um
Yeah, and of course, again, we don't want to speak for the the women.
yeah, of
So,
course.
like ultimately, I'd like to hope that that is enough time.
Yeah, I agree.
Is where we're at.
Yeah. Man, I just can't stop reading that sentence. Like,
Which one? The one you sent me, or the one the
yeah,
dude wrote?
the one I sent you. Like, I can't believe that came from my brain.
Oh god, I really want to share it now, but
No,
no.
no, 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 no.
Oh, you keep it. We
Uh,
keep it. We keep it.
yeah,
We
we
keep
keep it.
it.
We keep
We
it.
keep it. We keep
That's
it.
just no. I didn't mean it.
Just no, I didn't
I
mean
didn't mean
it.
it. I didn't mean it.
I'd like to formally apologize
Yeah,
for the
yeah,
statement
yeah,
that I did not release.
yeah. But has typed to my fellow
Cohort.
companion.
Yes, cohort
Yeah.
companion. Oh
Ooh.
man. Honestly, that was a decent way to kind of not close up, but rather like round it out towards the
Yeah,
end. I
yeah,
think it'd
yeah.
be far too
It,
heavy.
yeah, quite light. Maybe lightened it up quite a bit.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of lightening up, tangent, because we
Mm-hmm.
talked about religion for a little bit. I was
Mm-hmm.
talking with my brother earlier about we were talking about like the concept of time for like a little bit. This
Mm-hmm.
came out of literally nowhere, and
Mm-hmm.
he was like, "Yeah, like what would have happened if like we made up a different concept that wasn't this version of time, or like what if we didn't do that?" And then I was like, I always thought was like kind of funny was that like the world works off of the system of like BCAC, before Christ, after Christ, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then I'm kind of like, I told him, I was like, what if we worked off a different system? What if we were BBAB, before Buddha, after Buddha? so
Mm-hmm.
then, so it's like, so I was like, oh, what's the date? What's the date? It's like, oh, July or like June 27th, 4072. It's like, what? Yeah, 4072 AB. What the fuck's AB?
Honestly, like
After
I'm
Buddha.
not. I don't think it'd even impact us that much in that specific scenario. If like the months and days stayed consistent and it was just the year.
Yeah, I don't think like well, our discussion about time wasn't about that. That was more like a byproduct. But for me,
Uh-huh.
I just thought it would be funny if like someone was like, "Oh, like we'd have to start specifying." So it's like
Uh-huh.
2022 AC versus like 4072 AB versus like whatever other religious aspects that there are for that. But like time as a construct, um like if we didn't have hours, seconds, minutes, then our not just our like definitions of times, but also like perception of time would be different too, right? Ultimately.
Like what is a long time?
Yeah,
Is that
yeah,
where
yeah,
you come
exactly. Like things like that, or like how a day would feel to us might even be vastly different.
I I agree, but then I think if we were to like, I think in most cases,
Hmm.
outside of like, I agree that there are probably moments where like, oh, maybe we weren't going to have 24 hours, maybe weren't going to have minutes,
Yeah.
but or like months or years. But I think would have been really consistent in almost every case is days, because we have the sun. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the sun is definitely like the biggest
Yeah.
factor of
So like
consistency in terms
we
of
may
time.
not have considered it a day, like the word day,
Hmm.
but we would have most people would probably realize there's dark time, light time, and probably have made a system around that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Especially,
don't doubt that. Yeah.
but like it's interesting to think about. It's like that thought process of like before I like figured it out, I was like, how do I know that my blue is the same as your blue?
Right.
You know, like is that kind of fun, like thinking, I guess. But then it got ruined because they were like, oh, we can see the wavelength of the light and see if everyone perceives it in the same way. And I'm just like, God damn it, okay. Kind of ruined it for me, but like, whatever.
Yeah,
That's
fuck you
fine.
too, bro.
Yeah, fuck you, bro.
It's like that idea where like science just for some people it really just ruins the romance of it all,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. That was like one of the few times where I was like, God damn it, I thought I was onto something.
I thought I had something special.
Yeah, because I can remember the exact moment I had this idea.
Uh,
I was in the lobby of an orthodontist like office,
okay.
and like I don't know, I was just looking at colors and I was like, whoa, what if my blue is not the same as your blue? We would never know. We would just call it blue, but maybe your blue is like what I see as red, you know? But then, yeah, no, I'm just dumb.
I feel
Turns
like
out.
that reflects a lot on like how people talk though, right? Like,
What do you mean?
well, cuz that's that concept as a whole, this idea where like if you're having a discussion but you use the same word but you have different definitions for it, then ultimately you will have a very different natured conversation than what should be happening because you ultimately have
Um,
different definitions for the word, right? But TLDR, if you try to have a discussion with the same person using the same words with different definitions, you won't end up having a coherent conversation sometimes due to the
yeah.
dissonance or the difference in definition. And there's a term for that, I think. I could be wrong, but I feel like there's a term for it, but
Mode
that's
long.
essentially what you were describing,
Yeah.
and that's a cool it's a cool thing to dwell on because I think a lot of people have, especially recently, like there's a lot of discussions where people think they're using the same word in the same way, but they're not, and that causes a lot of not a lot of, but it causes
Problemos.
some causes some turbulence, some disruption, some differences.
We've hit some turbulence. Please put on your seatbelt and don't move about the cabin. I don't know where that came from. I can't hear you again.
All right,
Or is
thanks
it
for coming
just
for this
my
week's episode. If you liked it, like, comment,
comment?
subscribe.
Yeah, and if you have anything you want to say to us about anything we talked about, let us know.
Yeah, just drop it in the comments.
Here we will
If we
we'll be
were,
happy to discuss.
yeah, if we were uneducated little fucks about some things, feel free to
Us uneducated? It's almost like we didn't say that 10 times in the video.
listen. We might have said it 10
Ooh.
times, but like, you never know, bro. They might
It's,
have
I,
skipped over the
that's
exact
what I'm saying.
points.
I'm a skipperoonie. I also
Yeah,
skip around.
but, what is it? Also, a little thing. If you made it this far, I appreciate you. I appreciate you.
Yo, you a
Just,
G.
yeah,
I
you
like
a
your
real
cut,
one.
G.
I like your cut G. Dang.
Yeah.
Fucking love
But
that
yeah,
Taco Bell sound. It's beautiful.
thank you for coming. Thank you for
Yeah,
watching.
thank you for watching, for listening, and we will catch you again next week.
Indeed.
Bye.
Goodbye.